The day Nora decided to leave, she was lying on the cold tile floor of her kitchen, her left ankle twisted beneath her, and the only sound in the house was the television upstairs, where her husband, Kenneth, was watching the game. She had been down there for 20 minutes before she even tried to call his name. She wasn't sure what stopped her at first. Maybe some part of her already knew. Some part that had been keeping score for years, quietly the way women do, not because they want to, but because survival requires it. "Kenneth," she finally said. Not a scream, not a cry. Just his name, the way you say a word you've repeated so many times it's lost all its meaning. The television kept going. She reached for the counter above her and pulled herself, slowly, back to standing. Her ankle screamed. She bit it down on the inside of her cheek and breathed through it. Then she finished making dinner. That was 3 months ago. And that was the moment everything changed. Not because of what Kenneth did, but because of what he didn't do. Because he never came downstairs. Because when he finally walked into the kitchen 40 minutes later, he looked at the food on the stove and said, "What took so long?" She didn't answer him. She just set the table and sat down across from him and thought, quietly, to herself, "I have to get out of here." People always want to know when it started. As if there's a single point you can put your finger on and say that's where the story begins. But that's not how it works. It never is. Nora had grown up in a small town in northern Ohio, the kind of place where the diner on Main Street had the same menu it had since 1987, and everybody knew your parents' names. Her mom, Claudine, had worked at the county clerk's office for 30 years. Her dad, Ray, drove a delivery truck. They were quiet people, steady people. They showed their love by showing up, dinner on the table, oil change before winter, a card in the mail on your birthday no matter what. Nora had been a good student. Not exceptional but earnest. She'd gone to a state school in Columbus on a partial scholarship, studied early childhood education, and come back home after graduation because she didn't quite know what else to do with herself. She'd planned to teach. She'd always loved kids. There was something about the way a 7-year-old looked at the world, like it was still surprising, still full of things worth being curious about, that made her feel like the work mattered. She'd been substitute teaching at Elmwood Elementary for 6 weeks when she met Kenneth at a friend's cookout on a Saturday in August. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. He laughed easily and listened carefully, or seemed to. He asked her questions about her job like he was genuinely interested. He texted her that same night. By November, they were serious. By the following spring, they were engaged. Nora's mom raised one eyebrow when Nora told her, not in a dramatic way, just a quiet little movement that Nora filed away and didn't think about again until much later. "He seems like a lot," Claudine had said carefully. "What does that mean?" "It just means make sure you're keeping space for yourself, baby. That's all." Nora hadn't understood what she meant at the time. She thought her mother's was being cautious the way mothers are sometimes cautious, out of habit more than intuition. She was 26 years old and in love, and the world felt uncomplicated in the way it only does when you don't yet know what you're walking into. They got married on a Saturday in May. The photos were beautiful. The first year was fine. The second year was fine. By the third year, Nora had stopped teaching. It hadn't happened all at once. Kenneth had taken a regional sales job that required him to travel 2 or 3 times a month. And somewhere in the logistics of that, who was cooking? Who was handling the house? Who was available when his company called last minute? Nora had slowly become the person who handled everything. It was never a conversation they had. It was never a decision she consciously made. It just happened, the way a lot of things happen in a marriage, gradually, and then all at once. She told herself it was temporary. She'd go back to teaching in the fall. Then fall came, and Kenneth had a client dinner she needed to attend with him. And then there was a leak in the basement that took 3 weeks to fix. And then Kenneth's mother, Lorene, had a hip procedure and needed help for a month. And by the time Nora looked up, 2 years had passed since she'd been in a classroom. She brought it up once, going back. They were sitting on the back porch on a Sunday evening in late spring, and the light was that particular shade of gold that makes everything look like it's worth saving. And Nora had thought, this is a good moment. A soft moment. A moment when he'll hear me. "I've been thinking about going back to work," she said. "Maybe in the fall. I talked to someone at the district and there's an opening at a school over on Fulton." Kenneth didn't look up from his phone. "We don't need the money." "I know, it's not about the money." He did look up then. He had a way of looking at her that made her feel like she was being assessed rather than seen. "Then, what's it about?" "It's about, I miss it. I miss having something that's mine." He looked back at his phone. "You have plenty to do here." That was the whole conversation. And Nora, because she was still trying to make it work, because she was still operating under the belief that if she was patient and careful and strategic, she could find a way through. She let it go. She let it go the way you let go of a lot of things in a marriage that isn't quite right. You tell yourself it's not worth the fight. You tell yourself there will be a better time. You tell yourself that people are complicated, and love is a practice, and nothing worth having is easy. You say all of these things to yourself and you keep setting the table. She didn't notice how bad it had gotten until she got sick. It was November, 5 years into their marriage, and Nora came down with what she thought was a bad cold. It stretched into the second week, and she was exhausted in a way that felt heavier than fatigue, something more like being emptied out. She finally went to her doctor, who ran some tests and told her she had pneumonia, mild but real, and that she needed to rest. Actual rest. Not take it easy. Rest. She told Kenneth that night. He was standing at the kitchen counter going through the mail, and he didn't look up when she told him. "The dry cleaning needs to be picked up tomorrow," he said. "I've got an early call." She waited. "Did you hear what I said? I have pneumonia." "I heard you." He set down an envelope. "Are you on antibiotics?" "Yes, then you'll be fine." He picked up another envelope. "What's for dinner?" She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at him for a long moment. She was running a fever. Her chest ached with every breath, and her husband, the man she had built 8 years of her life around, was asking her what was for dinner. She ordered a pizza. She ate 2 slices in bed. She fell asleep at 8 o'clock and didn't set an alarm. The next morning, she picked up the dry cleaning. It was her friend Ren who said it first. Ren had been Nora's closest friend since college. They'd met in a child development seminar sophomore year and stayed close through everything that followed. Ren was a school counselor now, with 2 kids of her own and a husband named Dex, who once drove an hour in a snowstorm to bring Nora soup when Kenneth was traveling, and she had that pneumonia. Ren was the kind of person who noticed things. They were sitting at Ren's kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon in January, drinking coffee, and Nora had just finished telling her about the ankle incident. Lying on the floor, Kenneth not coming down, dinner finished before he even noticed, and Ren had put down her mug and looked at Nora the way people look at you when they're choosing their words very carefully. "How long have you felt invisible?" she said. Nora opened her mouth to say something deflecting. Something like, "It's not that bad," or "He's just distracted lately," or any of the dozen small pardons she had learned to offer automatically. But then she stopped. She actually thought about the question. "A long time," she said finally. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. Ren nodded, like she already knew. "Nora, what do you want your life to look like?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." She did. She did know. She just hadn't let herself say it out loud because saying it out loud made it real, and real meant she had to do something about it. She wanted to teach again. She wanted to walk into a classroom in September and spend the day with 8-year-olds who needed her to show them how to sound out words and settle conflicts and believe that they were capable of hard things. She wanted to have money in an account that was hers. She wanted to have a conversation at dinner about something other than Kenneth's coworkers and Kenneth's commute, and Kenneth's very strong opinions about the Naisbers' landscaping. She wanted to feel at the end of a day like she had done something, like she still existed. "I want to go back to teaching," she said. "Okay," Ren said simply. "Then let's figure out how." She didn't tell Kenneth. Not yet. She knew how that conversation would go. The assessment look, the dismissal dressed up as practicality, the gentle but firm redirection back to the life he had decided they were going to have. She had too many of those conversations stored in her body. She needed to come to him with something solid, a plan, something he couldn't easily dissolve. She started quietly. She reached out to a former professor who was still connected to the district. She updated her credentials, which had lapsed but were renewable. She found out about a position opening at Crestwood Elementary in March, 2nd grade, which was exactly what she'd always wanted, and she applied for it on a Thursday afternoon while Kenneth was in a meeting in Cleveland. She told her mom. Claudine had listened to the whole thing on the phone. The ankle, the pneumonia, the invisible years, the application, and when Nora finished, there was a pause on the line. Then her mom said, "I've been waiting for you to make this call for about 3 years. Why didn't you say something?" "Because it wasn't mine to say. But I'm glad you're saying it now." Another pause. "What do you need from us?" "I don't know yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe just knowing you're there. We're always here. You know that." That night, Nora sat in the guest room. She'd started spending time in there on evenings when the main bedroom felt too small, and she did something she hadn't done in years. She made a list. Just for herself. Things she needed, things she could do, steps she could take. small and specific, and hers. It felt strange. It felt like using a muscle she'd forgotten she had. She read it over 3 times. Then she folded it and put it in the pocket of her cardigan, close to her body, like something she needed to keep warm. The letter came on a Wednesday. She saw it in the online portal, an offer from Crestwood Elementary, 2nd grade, starting in August. They wanted an answer within 5 business days. She read it 4 times. Then she sat very still at the kitchen table and let herself feel it. All of it. The hope and the fear and the grief of having waited this long, and the strange, fragile thing that was beginning to open up in her chest like a window. She called Ren first. "You got it," she said when Ren picked up. There was a shriek on the other end of the line, and then laughter, and then Ren said, "I knew it! I knew it! I knew it!" And Nora started crying, the kind of crying that isn't sadness, the kind that comes when something you've been carrying for so long finally has somewhere to land. She called her mom next. Claudine picked up on the second ring, listened, and then said quietly but with a firmness that Nora had always loved about her, "Good, now you hold on to that." That night, she told Kenneth, she waited until after dinner. She had thought about the timing carefully, not to manipulate him, but because she knew herself, knew that she needed the table cleared and the kitchen clean, and nothing between her and the door in case the conversation went the way she expected. She sat down across from him in the living room, and she told him about the application, the interview, the offer. All of it straightforward, looking directly at him. Kenneth was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You did all of this without telling me." "Yes. Why?" "Because I knew what you'd say." He looked at her, then. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time in a very long time. "And what would I have said? That we don't need the money. That I have enough to do here. That the timing isn't right." He was quiet again. "What if it isn't?" "The timing is never going to be right," Nora said. "Not if we keep waiting for you to decide it is." She hadn't planned to say that last part, but once it was out, she didn't take it back. The weeks that followed were not easy. Kenneth didn't shout. He wasn't that kind of man. What he did instead was colder and more calculated, a sustained silence at dinner, a way of leaving the room whenever she walked into it, a series of small withdrawals designed to let her know that she had done something wrong. He mentioned, more than once, that she was being selfish, that she was disrupting things, that she wasn't thinking about the bigger picture. She had heard versions of this before, but something was different now. Something had shifted in her that made his words land differently. Not without pain, but without the power they used to have. She could feel it, the change. She was no longer trying to decode what she needed to do to make him comfortable. She was trying to figure out what she needed. She started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Albright, who had an office on the 3rd floor of a building near the library, and who had a very small cactus on her windowsill that Nora found oddly comforting. She went every week. She talked about her marriage and her mother, and the classroom she was going to walk into in August, and the person she had been at 26, and what it would take to get some part of her back. Dr. Albright never told her what to do. She just asked questions and listened, and occasionally said things that Nora found herself thinking about for days afterward. One afternoon in early April, she said, "When did you stop believing you deserved to take up space?" Nora didn't have an answer for that, but she wrote it down when she got home. She kept writing things down now, in a small notebook she kept in her bag, private and unread by anyone else. It was a small thing, but it was hers. By May, she had opened a personal checking account, not a joint account, her own. She'd been putting money into it from the household budget, a little at a time, not dishonestly, but quietly, carefully. She had begun to understand, in a way she hadn't let herself before, that leaving required logistics. That love, or the end of it, was also practically a question of what you had and where you could go. She was not planning to leave. Not yet. She was planning to have options. There's a difference, she told herself. She believed it, mostly. She had dinner with her parents in late May, just the 3 of them. Ray made his brisket, and Claudine made cornbread, and they sat at the kitchen table Nora had grown up eating at, and talked about everything and nothing the way families do. At the end of the night, when her dad was washing up and her mom walked her out to the car, Claudine put her hand on Nora's arm and looked at her with that particular steadiness she had always had. No judgment, no pressure, just presence. "How are you?" she said. Not the casual version, the real version. Nora leaned against the car door. The night was warm, early summer, fireflies starting up in the yard. "I'm figuring it out," she said. "Are you safe?" "Yes," she thought about it. "Yes, Mom, I'm safe." Claudine nodded. "Then you take whatever time you need, and when you know what you need to do, you come to us. That's what we're here for." Nora drove home with the windows down. The air smelled like cut grass and something faintly sweet she couldn't identify. She thought about her classroom, which she'd already visited twice now, a bright open room with windows that faced east, so the morning light came in strong. She'd started making lists of what she wanted on the walls. She thought about what her life could look like. Not what it should look like, not what anyone else expected it to look like, what she actually wanted it to be. For the first time in a long time, the thought didn't scare her. The last night happened on a Tuesday in June, which seemed too ordinary a day for something that would rearrange her life. They had been eating dinner. She had made pasta, nothing elaborate, and Kenneth had been on his phone through most of it, which was not unusual. What was unusual was that he looked up at some point and said, without particular warmth, "I got a call from my cousin today. He and his wife are coming through next month. I told them they could stay here." Nora looked at him. "For how long? A week? Maybe 10 days. I'll be at teacher orientation in August. I have a full week of training." He shrugged. So, I won't be here to host them, Kenneth." He looked at her the way he always looked at her when she said something that inconvenienced him. Not angry, just distant, as if she had said something slightly foolish and he was being patient about it. "I'm sure you can manage both." She set her fork down. It was such a small thing, in the grand accounting of all the small things that had accumulated over years. But something about that moment, his absolute certainty that her new life, the thing she had worked and waited and grieved and slowly rebuilt herself toward, was simply a variable he could manage around. Something about it settled into her body like a cold, clear fact. She said, "I'm not going to be here to host them, Nora. I mean that in more than one sense." She watched his face change. Not dramatically, he was too controlled for that, but something shifted in his eyes, some small recalibration. She had not planned this night. She had not decided this was the night. But when the moment came, she recognized it. The way you recognize a door you've been standing in front of for a long time finally coming open. She had her bag. She had her keys. She had a small account with her name on it, and a classroom waiting for her in August, and two parents who had always left the light on. She went upstairs. She packed what she needed. Not everything, just what she needed right now, tonight. It took 20 minutes. She had been ready for longer than she knew. Kenneth was still in the kitchen when she came back down. He was standing at the counter now, arms crossed, with that look on his face. The assessment look, the "you're being unreasonable" look. And he said, "You don't have to be dramatic about this." "I'm not being dramatic," she said quietly. "I'm leaving." She said it the way you say something that is simply true. No anger in it, no performance, just fact. She picked up her bag. She walked to the front door. She opened it and stepped out into the warm June night, and the air smelled like the beginning of summer. And somewhere down the street, a neighbor's sprinkler was running. And the world was very quiet and very ordinary. And she stood on the front step for just a moment before she walked to her car. She didn't look back. Not because she was trying to make a point, but because she had already said everything there was to say, and the only direction that made any sense now was forward. She stayed at her parents' house that first night. Her mom had the guest room made up, sheets changed, lamp on, as if she'd been expecting her, which maybe some part of her had been. Claudine didn't ask questions that night. She just poured 2 cups of tea and sat at the kitchen table with her daughter and let the quiet be what it was. Her dad came down in his robe around midnight, saw them sitting there, and without a word put his hand on Nora's shoulder, squeezed once, and went back to bed. She cried a little before she fell asleep. Not because she regretted leaving, she didn't. Not for a moment. But because grief isn't always about regret. Sometimes it's about what something could have been. Sometimes it's about the years that were spent and can't be unspent. And the person you were before you knew what you know now. And what it cost to get from there to here. You're allowed to grieve that even when you made the right choice. Especially then. By September, Nora was standing at the front of her classroom at Crestwood Elementary on the first day of school. 22 second graders. Their faces were that particular mixture of anxious and curious that she had always loved. Small people standing at the edge of something, not quite sure what it was, needing someone to make it feel safe to step forward. She introduced herself. She told them her name. She showed them the reading corner, the art supplies, the cubbies with their names on little label strips. She told them that this room was going to be a good place for them, that they were going to do hard things here, and that was okay. That she was going to be proud of them even on the difficult days. One small boy in the front row raised his hand. "Do you like teaching?" he asked, the kind of pure, unembarrassed question only 7-year-olds ask. Nora looked at him. The morning light was coming through the east windows the way she'd imagined it, filling the room with something warm and clear. Yes, she said. I really do. She had a long way to go still, she knew that. Divorce was slow and expensive and emotionally complicated, and there were days ahead that would require more from her than she felt she had. She knew that too, but she also knew this. She had made it to September. She had made it to this room this morning, these 22 faces looking back at her. She had found her way back to herself, not all at once, not without cost, but with something she had learned to trust again. Her own voice, telling her the truth, even when it was hard to hear. That was enough to begin.